venomous snakes. All our dangerous snakes are venomous snakes. So, does anyone know the difference between venom and poison? So, poison has to be ingested or eaten or absorbed through the skin, and venom has to be injected or bite the snake. There are poisonous snakes, but none in the U.S.
They're pretty.
Oh, yeah. Does anyone know if snakes give live birth or lay eggs?
Eggs?
It's actually both.
Okay.
Depends on the kind of snake. Here's a small little decayed snake I've got. Decayed brown snake. Trying to find her. Here she is.
She's tiny.
Oh yeah, she's a small little snake that just lives in wet dirt and under logs and eats earthworms. So, and if you see her, she's gravid or pregnant. So see how thick she is?
Yeah.
She's full of babies and she'll give live birth. You want to touch her? She's not gonna bump you. Even if she did, it wouldn't do anything. She couldn't do anything to you.
I'll call 911 right now. I'm just joking.
She's okay. She jumped.
Like she's gonna land on me.
Yeah, she couldn't hurt you if she tried. That happens. But she's fine. Alright, so does anyone know what group all our other venomous snakes belong to? So they're pit vipers or vipers. So they've got retractable fangs that fold out, and they have a heat sensing pit in their front of their face. They also have vertical pupils, so like a cat. So does anyone know our two most common venomous snakes here? Oh,
Those two.
These two.
Yeah.
Yep. You know what this one is?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a copperhead and this is a cottonmouth. Now, I'll also show you close. This is a real western diamondback rattlesnake.
Look at that.
So you can see the heat sensing pits here and here on the face, and you can see those fangs retracted out. So do you see the snake has a forked tongue? Snakes have a forked tongue. Do you know why it has a fork?
Mm-mm.
So they have the fork to give them directional smell. So if there's more particles in air on one side of the fork, it will know to go that direction. So copperheads and cottonmouths, there are two most common venomous snakes here in the park. Now, does anyone know why they both have bright yellow tails? So when they're born, they have these bright yellow tails. And as they get older, once they're about a year old, they lose that bright yellow tail. So the reason is this is called a caudal lure. So what they'll do is they'll coil up and put that yellow tail by their head like this baby cottonmouth is doing. And they'll wriggle that tail around like a worm. And they'll wait for a lizard or a frog to come close by, and then they'll strike it and have a meal.
They do that in the water too? Or just
Yep.
on the...
Yeah, they'll do it in the water or on land. But does anyone know why the copperhead causes the most venomous snake bites? grass.
Blend in pretty good.
They blend in really good. So they live mostly in forests, usually pretty close to water, but they eat a lot of rodents, they'll eat frogs, they'll eat lizards, sometimes even other snakes, and even cicadas. They're one of the few snakes we have out here that'll eat some insects. And these guys, does anyone know what their defense is other than just the camouflage? It's to freeze in place, so your movement, or so their movement doesn't give them away. So a lot of people step on these or accidentally pick them up in a bundle of firewood, and they're not an aggressive snake. They don't want to bite, but the thing is, we're 100 times their size. So if you pick one up or step on one, it's going to really hurt them, and unfortunately they have only one way to get us off, and that's to bite. But thankfully deaths from these guys or any venomous snake in the U.S. is really rare. There's about 9,300 venomous snake bites every year, and there's only about 3 to 5 deaths, and almost all of those people refuse medical treatment. Does anyone know why the cottonmouth is called a cottonmouth?
Color inside the mouth?
Yep. So their defense, they'll show you the white inside of their mouth. Now cottonmouths, where do these guys live? So they like wet areas, swamps, ponds, usually pretty shallow areas. Does anyone know what these guys eat? So they'll eat a lot of fish, they'll eat frogs, they'll eat rodents, they'll eat basically anything. And actually one of the reasons they're so important to the ecosystem is because these guys are one of the few scavengers in wetlands. So these guys will actually clean up when a temporary body of water, like a pool, starts to dry up and all the fish and tadpoles and salamanders start to die. These guys clean that up before it becomes a problem, because if all these dead animals stayed in a wet area with low oxygen, there's some very dangerous bacteria that can form, and that water would be unsafe to touch, let alone drink. So without cottonmouths, we'd have some pretty dirty water.
Serve a purpose.
Yep. Now, does anyone know the other 2 venomous snakes we got here in the area? Does anyone know what this is? So this is a timber rattlesnake. So the timber rattlesnake is the second most venomous and 3rd longest rattlesnake in the U.S. They can actually get about 6 foot and almost 20 pounds. So, but thankfully, because these guys don't have many natural predators, really they're pretty placid and calm, and they don't strike all too many people, even though they have a really wide range. But unfortunately, their numbers have started to decline because of feral hogs and people killing them. And they were on the state endangered list for the state of Texas for decades. They were just taken off last year. But if you see one of these guys, definitely leave it alone. Does anyone want to touch some timber rattlesnake skin?
Sure.
So they're really easy to identify once you know what their marking looks like. So they have this V shape or chevron shape on their back. And they can range from a light to a dark brown, or in some areas almost black. But they'll usually always have these V-shaped markings on their back.
You killed that one?
No, this one shed its skin. It came from
okay.
the snake this came from still alive.
Oh, okay.
So, yep.
Nice.
Yep, it came from about a 4.5 footer. This one was one I handed out and passed around, and the shed got broken up. So hopefully I'll get another shed soon.
You know where he lives?
Yeah,
Nice.
I know where he lives.
Nice.
He's well fed.
Nice.
He's not here.
Okay.
So does anyone know the other venomous snake we have in the area? Does anyone know what this is? So this is a western pygmy rattlesnake. So it's extra important to know what this snake looks like because they have a really small rattle. When they rattle their tail, it just sounds like a bee buzzing in place on the ground. It doesn't even sound like a rattle. So, and since their rattle is so small, they break it off all the time because all a rattle is made up of is keratin, just like your fingernails. And it's really thin. And you can't actually age a rattlesnake like a lot of people say by counting the buttons. They get a new button every time they shed their skin, and they break off all the time. But since these guys have such a small rattle, they break off even more frequently. So most of the time you won't even be able to hear one, or if you do, it'll sound like an insect. Now thankfully there's never been a fatality from a pygmy rattlesnake, and they're the most common venomous snake to get bit by in Florida. There's around 300 bites a year from these guys, and there's never been a death. And there's 3 different subspecies. So this is the western pygmy rattlesnake. This is what's found here in Texas. It's also found in Arkansas. It's found in Mississippi, Louisiana. This is the Carolina pygmy rattlesnake. This is only found in North Carolina, South Carolina, and North Georgia. And then this is the dusky pygmy rattlesnake. So the dusky pygmy rattlesnake's found in Florida, South Georgia, and South Alabama. But they all look a little bit different depending on where you're at. So, and these guys like sandy areas with well-drained soil, and they eat mostly frogs, but they'll also eat lizards, salamanders, and other small reptiles and amphibians. So you usually find them close to water, but they're not in the water, usually like a cottonmouth. But all snakes can swim, so even desert species.